And good morning to all of you fantastic party people that have joined into today's session. The 8 essential features of Smart Supplier Scorecards, hosted by myself, Sam Jenks. Looking forward to getting into the content. Appreciate your punctuality. We're just going to wait a moment or two more to allow some additional guests that are going to be joining today join in, and then we will get into the day's content. We have a fair amount to be able to get through, a content rich session, plenty to be able to screenshot. With that being said, don't worry, you don't need to. There will be a handout at the end of the session of the slide deck that will be presented. We also will absolutely be launching some polls today. So keep those voting fingers ready to be able to make sure that you are able to engage in those polls. The more people that answer, the more we're able to, of course, gauge the room, the more insightful the takes are going to be for everybody. So please make sure to get your voting fingers ready. Additionally, we will have a Q&A session towards the end of the session, last 5 to 10 minutes, depending upon engagement from the audience. We're going to answer some questions. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat line, and we will mark those questions as questions during the session and get around to them during the Q&A as well. So don't be shy. If you have a question that pops up and you don't want to forget it, make sure to input that into the chat right away. As always, what I would love to be able to see also is if you want to say hello in the chat, get the chat going here. Yeah, great for you to be able to say hello if you'd like to in the chat and where you're calling in from as well. It'd be great to see how global today's session is for the rest of the guests that are in attendance. So please type in the chat, hello, where are you at? I'll do myself. Saying hi from Sweden here. Robin from Massachusetts, fantastic. Go Sox. All right, Kimberly from Arizona. Thank you very much. CEEH credit. Sorry, is that a joke, Kimberly? I'm not sure. But I'm not sure what the credit is particularly. Some Germans in attendance. Guten Tag. Hello, everybody. Hey from Denmark. Nice. Canada, Rhode Island, Madrid, Argentina. Awesome. Very global gang today. All looking for one thing, which is to learn how we can be able to build smarter supplier scorecards. So thank you guys for taking the time to be able to attend today, and looking forward to getting into the day's content, which we're going to start with now. For those of you that don't know much about us at Kodiak Hub, just a quick overview of who we are and what we're about. Supplier relationship management is the name of the game. We are a vendor within the space of SRM and have been so for the last 9 years. Kodiak provides a broader platform to our customers, which is focused on supplier risk, compliance, ESG, quality and performance management, as well as then collaboration and supplier information, data and document management. The solution is one that is modular, which allows our customers to be able to land and expand with the solution and take a journey together with our platform when it comes to their own evolution within supplier relationship management as well. We're going to demo some of the platform during today's session, demo some of our supplier scorecard. If you guys are ready for a solution or not, hopefully today we'll still be able to provide you with some takes. This is, of course, coming from our perspective as a vendor within this space, understanding some of our best practices for supplier relationship management and supplier scorecarding. But some of these can be able to be applicable, of course, even if you're not yet in market for a new solution. So keep that in mind, of course, and we'll try and, of course, highlight where we can be able to deliver that value either in our solution or in alternative solutions as well. To set the scene, I wanted to be able to take a step back and go back about 15, 20 years ago. The nucleus of this company is that Malin Schmidt, our CEO and founder, was fed up with seeing people like me running around with our glossy CRM solutions and sales and marketing and thinking to ourselves, why in the heck don't we have something like this to manage a global vendor base? We believe, and this still sits at the core of our belief and our vision as a company, that SRM has the potential to have the exact same impact on procurement that CRM had on sales all those years ago. The real fact, though, is that teams need the tools to be able to follow up their vendor base, and you don't have them today. CRM systems are integral to a sales organization. We are a company here that uses CRM on a day-to-day basis. What is the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning as a sales leader or a sales professional? Well, I log into my CRM. Why? Is because that's where my contacts and prospects lie. That's where my tasks lie. That's where the activities that are set out for me during the day lie. That's where my analytics and insights lie surrounding the success of my team, but also the potential success of my team. So the question is, why isn't procurement leveraging the exact same technology for their supplier relationships? Both those that exist and those that are forming or formative, to be able to follow up on due diligence, onboard vendors faster, communicate and collaborate with vendors, see trends in spend or performance. This is the importance, of course, of smart supplier scorecards. And we're going to define a little bit what we mean by smart supplier scorecards. But before we do so, I wanted to take a quick poll from everyone in attendance here. The simple question, yes, no. Does your sales team in your business, to your knowledge, have a dedicated CRM system? Simple yes, no question. Does your sales team have a dedicated CRM system in your organization? If you do not know, then feel free to not answer. But it's a simple yes, no question. I see 44 people in attendance, only 13 answers on yes, 18 on no's, 24 and 26 in total. See if we can get a little bit more engagement here to round things out. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and not stop the voting here. So about half respondents, or about 60% of our respondents here today. With that being said, the majority, about 65%, say yes, that their teams in their sales organizations do in fact have dedicated CRM systems. Interesting to be able to see. Now, then I'd like to be able to ask everybody in attendance, does this look familiar? It's not a poll, it's a rhetorical question. And we're amongst friends here, right? There's no reason to write in the chat either, a yes or no, but I just want you to take a step back and think to yourself, does this look familiar in your day-to-day? Is your vendor data spread out in various spreadsheets, in various different homegrown solutions? Are the interfaces a little bit outdated where your vendor data and the activities to be able to manage your strategic relationships lie? Just take a second and think. Does this in fact look familiar? And then I want us to do the exact same exercise and answer a poll here. Does your procurement team have a dedicated SRM system? Simple yes, no question, the exact same question surrounding sales and CRM, a solution that I frankly could not live without. I'm curious to be able to hear from everybody in this particular poll. Does your procurement team have a dedicated SRM system? Let's continue to get voting. 48 people in attendance, only 20 answers. Please take the time to be able to vote. Yes or no, does your procurement team have a dedicated SRM system? And continue to vote. We will then, about 63% of the audience has voted. We'll stop the voting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Interesting. 73% of the respondents of 65% of the audience, nonetheless, a good turnout. Thank you for those that voted. 73% of the audience has now answered no. Your team does not have a dedicated SRM system, whereas 27% said yes. Now look at this for a second. This is literally flipped on a dime. The revenue driving part of the organization, sales being the revenue driving part of the organization, has systems in place. The part of the organization that is tasked with traditionally savings and cost reduction does not have anything in place. Now, let me ask you, what is the value of those savings related to new sales? Meaning, if you're able to make incremental savings in your supplier base, avoid risk, isn't that sometimes greater than the investments that you're going to be making in sales and marketing to be able to make new sales, whether that be to consumers or new logos? It's an age-old dichotomy and an important one. The interesting thing is that this data that is now shared in this poll doesn't really stray too far away from the poll that we did with Procurement last year, which means that unfortunately, the dial isn't really moving very much within the space of supplier relationship management. Kodiak Hub did a study together with Procurement to be able to look at top performers within procurement related back to supplier relationship and performance management. And what we saw in that particular study is that 73%, almost the exact same percentage that answered here today, did not have any software to be able to follow up on their performance and the lifecycle management of their vendor base. No dedicated solution, whereas 28% did have a solution in place. Almost, or no, the exact same statistic that we were able to see here today. The most interesting thing is that of those respondents, only 7% of those respondents said that they're using some type of legitimate decision intelligence within their supplier lifecycle management, meaning, of course, some type of a scorecard or visualization tools, BI, to help guide them in the strategic decisions that they're making within the supplier relationships, whether that be risk or compliance, sustainability and ESG, or performance, quality, so forth and so on. The list is endless. Only 7% of those respondents had sufficient intelligence in place, whereas 100% of the high performers were using a minimum of 3 tools to be able to integrate performance data across the supplier lifecycle. So those that were, in fact, focusing on driving insights to drive performance, they had multiple tools in disparate systems with a lack of centralization to be able to track that actual performance of their vendor base. Now, this brings upon the age-old saying from Peter Drucker, and I think that this saying is, it's probably a lot of people in attendance here that are bored by hearing this. I sure am myself whenever I hear it in a management team meeting. With that being said, it's there because it's true, right? If you cannot measure your vendor base, you cannot manage your vendor base. And this is the importance of smart supplier scorecards. There is a change and a paradigm shift that is necessary to happen here. The sales organization and the procurement organization, there is a chasm between the system support, the insights that are provided to be able to manage the life cycle of a customer or a prospect versus a potential or existing supplier or vendor. This is something that we believe is important to be able to change. And smart supplier scorecards sit at the nucleus of being able to drive performance of a vendor base in the right direction. Now, if we're going to talk about smart supplier scorecards, then I think it's important that we frame what do we mean by smart? Well, I like going back to the acronym as we see on screen here of SMART in the context of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. When we look at our supplier scorecards, we need to ask ourselves, do we have a well-defined and clear and unambiguous way to be able to follow up on our vendors? Do we, in fact, have specific criteria that we can be able to follow the progress of? Do we have attainable and not impossible to achieve goals for our vendors to be able to follow up on? Are these things relevant to them that we are following up on, right? Are we, for example, focusing in on ISO 9001 certification with vendors that are tech vendors? Or are we following up on ISO 27001 certifications, right? Are we following up on on time and full with the delivery of parts per million for vendors that are in a service space? No, that's somebody that's a manufacturing or a direct material vendor, right? The last piece is, of course, timely. And this is almost one of the most important parts of it, right? With a clear goal, we need a clear timeline that we are trying to be able to work within to create some sense of urgency within our vendor performance. Now, what I think that this requires is not just scorecards, but it requires in some essence also a bit of a mindset shift when we talk about what we talk about in supplier relationship management, what supplier relationship management really means to our business. Here on screen, you're seeing kind of the classic source to pay process, right? That source to pay process historically is broken down into two very distinct pillars, as we see on screen here, right? Source to contract, procure to pay. You guys know this in your sleep. With that being said, in this traditional model, we see nestled underneath source to contract, is supplier relationship management, strategic sourcing, and contract management. These particular elements are kind of subsets of the broader source to contract process. Supplier relationship management within this particular context is maybe thought of as, kind of the beginning of the relationship, onboarding, due diligence, maybe even, for example, some type of segmentation. With that being said, what this lacks is a life cycle approach. The reason why we bring this up is because I think that in certain aspects, the framing of supplier relationship management is also potentially the hinder to be able to actually drive smart supplier relationships and smart supplier scorecards, because we're not looking at the relationship and the performance of a vendor from a life cycles perspective. We're looking at it from a snapshot in time. And what does that mean is that our scorecards then become myopic. They're not focused on the full 360-degree view of the supplier relationship. So when we look at the integrated source to pay process, the process that we believe is kind of emerging as one of those new ways that people are looking at their source to pay and looking at their technology stack. And this is a model that is inspired by our friends at Archlet as well. We believe that supplier relationship management, risk management, and third-party risk management of the vendor base is going to be equally end-to-end and life cycle focused as the ERP. In fact, the source to pay process needs to be holistically integrated between your strategy, source to contract, and purchase to pay, as well as your ERP, together with your SRM systems. This is something that we truly believe is a mindset shift that needs to be able to happen. And when building up new ecosystems, we need to take into consideration that not one size fits all. The end-to-end source to pay suites are a little bit of a thing of the past, right? I think that everybody in this attendance knows that. With that being said, if we are going to determine a way to be able to scorecard our vendors, then we need to look at interconnectivity between solutions. Why? Is because one vendor cannot rule them all. It's that true saying, right? A master, jack of all trades and a master of none. If we're looking to build smart, holistic supplier scorecards, then we need to look to a supplier relationship management solution or some type of supplier scorecarding solution that is able to be able to integrate from multiple data sources to be able to give us the holistic and 360-degree view that we require as procurement professionals trying to source in a more strategic fashion as well. Now, what does a supplier relationship management solution do within this context? Well, this is an example of Kodiak Hub, what we can be able to do. Pull data, push data between our solution and an enterprise data lake or an ERP. Pull data or push data to suppliers or internal stakeholders, and equally so with existing licenses for third-party risk and or for other types of risk solutions, for example, that we as a vendor license, right? This is what we mean by truly being able to have the data at your disposal to be able to create smart supplier scorecards. It is not just from one data source. It is not limited to a spreadsheet. It is holistic. It is driven by APIs. It is alive and living continuously to be able to make sure that we can make that measurable over time with a focus on progress. Now, I'm not going to spend very much time on this particular screenshot, mainly because we're going to get into the platform in just a moment's time to be able to look around in a live version of Kodiak Hub to be able to see what do we believe should be encompassed within a smart supplier scorecard. But before we get into that particular demonstration, we want to leave you guys with the actual 8 takeaways of the essential features, allowing everybody in this attendance to be able to not just look at our solution, but maybe look, kind of zoomed out of what are some of the best practices to smart supplier scorecards, whether they're in an SRM solution or not. But here's a friendly reminder to everybody in attendance. Your suppliers are friends and they are not food. We are not building these insights to be able to beat them down. We are building these insights to be able to source more strategically, to source smarter, and more importantly, to be able to give them the value that they require from us to be able to improve. I had a fantastic conversation with a customer recently, and I said to them, what is your main goal of building supplier scorecards? I typically hear, well, we want to be able to have better negotiation power. We, in a lot of aspects, want to be able to make sure that we can follow up on our vendor spend. We want to be able to keep all of our vendor data and documentation in one place, right? This particular person was zoomed out and they took a second to be able to answer and they thought for it and they said, because I want my suppliers to be able to know where they are at and where I want them to be able to go. This is a focus that is collaborative, that is strategic, and that is possibly the main reason why supplier scorecarding is so important. Your vendors are 55 to 65% of the innovation driven within your supply chain. That's not just coming from my head, that is an ISM statistic. If we do not have the tools to be able to measure them, we cannot manage them, we are not driving innovation for our end customers in their businesses. So, how do we reach this pinnacle of driving performance, collaboration, and innovation? Well, we like to talk about SRM from a perspective of this pyramid. This is a model that was developed 4 to 5 years ago and has been really refined over those years by Kodiak Hub team. We believe that SRM is critical, right? But the full potential, the pinnacle of what SRM is all about is rarely reached. Driving impact in the broader supply chain, driving collaboration and innovation with your vendors, and making sure that we have true performance and a strategic view of our vendor performance. The issue is that a lot of people want to jump here without the pillars that we see underneath of SIM and discovery or onboarding. Risk management, compliance, and qualification really in place. Those operational and tactical building blocks are necessary to be able to, of course, drive more strategic relationships with your vendors and, of course, drive more strategic insights for your business. And I think that this is one of the elements that we're trying to, of course, help our customers with, is to understand that this is a land and expand journey. And I think that that needs to be the mindset when we're building smart supplier scorecards as well. This is not a magic wand situation. This is not a ChatGPT prompt. This is not a quick fix, turn on the light switch or turn it off. This is a journey that a business needs to be able to be ready to take over time to be able to improve upon the insights that you can build for your vendor base. And it all starts, of course, with good supplier information management, moving from that operational to the tactical to the more strategic elements of those things. So, what are the essentials to smart supplier scorecards? Well, we have 8 of them on screen here, and we're going to dig into these one by one, give a little bit of an overview. Like I said, the second part of this session is going to be focused on a demonstration of Kodiak Hub's supplier scorecards and what it is that our solution delivers within a 360-degree and holistic view, delivering on all of these particular 8 points, as we believe that these are some of the best practices for building up smart supplier scorecards and the essentials for smart supplier scorecards for any business that is looking to be able to source in a more strategic fashion. Now, with that being said, I'd like to stop for one more poll before we get into things. I'm curious for everybody in attendance here, and I'll go back to the particular slide that I just had up. How many of these particular systems, or amongst friends here, don't be shy with your responses, how many systems do you need or do you have today in order to fulfill these 8 essentials of smart supplier scorecards? Is it only one system? Do you rely on a handful of systems, 1 to 3 systems, 3 to 5 systems, or is it over 5 systems, which means, of course, that data is not centralized currently? And that's not a bad thing, right? Some of this insights should be living in different systems. But of course, an SRM solution and smart scorecarding is all about also bringing that underneath the exact same hood. So I'm just curious of hearing from everybody in attendance really quickly. How many systems do you currently have today in order to be able to fulfill these 8 essentials for smart supplier scorecards? SIM, contract and document management, keeping your product and service data in check, making sure that you have your third-party risk profiling, communication and collaboration with your vendors, corrective actions, ESG and compliance, performance monitoring, rating methodology of some sort, which of course is a progression, a BI tool to show value progression over time. Take a second to be able to answer. I'm going to close off the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the vast majority of attendance of people here have over 3 systems, plenty with over 5 systems. This, of course, poses challenges. We recognize that. We are sympathetic to that as well, as data often lives in, disparate different systems, and bringing it together is not the easiest thing in the world. Hopefully, we'll be able to give some inspiration today to give an understanding of what smart supplier scorecarding looks like, and also what smart SRM looks like to be able to drive supplier scorecards that really drive strategic decision making in your vendor base. So let's walk these through one by one. And of course, we're going to get into these particular 8 features within the scorecards in a live demonstration. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the slides. What I do want to be able to give some background to, though, is what we mean by supplier information management, all the way through to the 8th item, which was, of course, the rating methodology. Starting with SIM, of course, that foundation to any good supplier scorecarding, but also to any good supplier relationship management. This is all about being able to make sure that you're able to segment, have your data in order, have your vendors able to update their own data, see their own data, and of course, to be able to take some of that burden off of you as well. It's also important that there's push and pulls between your supplier information with your ERP. API integrations are big here, right? To make sure that you are determining what is the golden record, where is that journey going to start, and of course, that there is data quality between the solutions as well. We're going to get into what we mean by this within the scorecards in just a moment, but supplier information management is kind of the foundation. Once we know, of course, our information, well, we need to have our documentation in order. How often does it happen, of course, that a certification is expiring, a contract expiring, because it's sitting in a SharePoint somewhere and nobody knows where it is? Well, pretty much every single day. What smart supplier scorecarding can be able to do is reduce those pains and those aches. I think that we all feel very operationally, and open ourselves up to audit exposure and alike, fines even. I think that documentation and keeping these things nestled within scorecards creates a situation that it's ease of use for a team. It gives them the tools that they need to be able to quickly find documentation when and where they need it. And of course, being able to stay on top of expiry dates and trigger things like automated requests to vendors. These are huge to be able to make sure that everybody is able to, stay on top of documentation and make sure that we're not opening ourselves up for risk exposure or not missing contracts that are going into new terms without us knowing about it as well. Very important element to supplier scorecarding, another element of foundational supplier information management as well. That third kind of element of supplier information management, which I think is sometimes left behind, but is very important, particularly within direct material supply chains, but equally as important within service related to supply chains, is the products and services that you are in fact harnessing from your vendor base, right? So what is, for example, the commodities that we're buying? How is the relationship between the vendor, the agreement, and the products that we have in place? That relational data is incredibly important. And it's only becoming more and more important, especially with the emergence of different types of EU-driven regulations, such as EUDR. And yes, if you're located in North America, this does impact you as well if you have your parts of your supply chain within the European Union. I think that what we look at is really how can we be able to broaden our understanding of a vendor. And I think that relational data between contract, product, and supplier themselves is an incredibly important triangulation to be able to have an eye on, and something that I think is equally as kind of attuned to a lifecycle management as an ERP in that case as well. The fourth item is focused on that initial risk profile. Great, we have food and shelter. Well, let's of course move up to that next level of Maslow's hierarchy here, right? Let's make sure that we have some type of safety and security. Let's make sure that our vendors are of course not going to go bust. Let's make sure that we can do double materiality risk assessments. Let's make sure that we, for example, in some way, shape, or form have an understanding of reputational risks that's out there in the market. This is incredibly important. Why? Is because your vendor base is an extension of your supply chain, but it's an extension not only of your supply chain and your value chain, but it's an extension of your brand. And what does that mean? Of course, is that it's your reputation ultimately that is at risk based upon the vendors that you decide to work with. If you don't believe me, feel free to Google some of the things that have happened to big brands like Boeing and McDonald's. I don't think anybody's in attendance today. Sorry if you are, but I think that anyone that has been exposed within their supply chain can attest to this as well. And we'll look deeper into how we can be able to utilize some of these insights in our scorecarding capability in just a moment. Number five, communication, collaboration, actions as well. The ability to be able to track and follow up on nonconformities, corrective actions, the status of these things, as well as then make sure that we're able to go back to different types of repositive lines of communication. The ability to collaborate in a team, multi-stakeholder collaboration, but also somebody's out of office, another colleague needs to step in. That documentation and that communication surrounding that particular corrective action is not siloed to their particular inbox, right? These are all important aspects that make up a great opportunity to be able to house communication and collaboration in the same place that you, of course, are having those insights surrounding your vendor base as well. And we'll again get into the scorecard in just a bit and show off how it is that this looks within reality in a vendor scorecard and what that can be able to mean, of course, for a business that is looking to scorecard their vendors and follow up more so from a life cycle perspective and a life cycle management of their vendors as well. Moving on, we will then look at ESG and compliance profile. Well, of course, this is very important. Why? Well, we want to be able to have a wide criteria of different things that we're following up on, their operational risk and understanding that they're living up to our standards, our acceptance criteria for what a good vendor looks like, that we can be able to flag these risks, trigger workflows for approval when onboarding and doing due diligence of vendors, but also to be able to make sure that we can be able to build up a picture of what good looks like. And I think that this is the aspect where ratings really helps because it simplifies the complexity of, for example, quantitative and qualitative insights that are going to be fed in from vendor onboarding, audits, and performance evaluations. And a lot of this rating methodology helps to simplify kind of to that RAG perspective, red, amber, green. Is a vendor doing good? Great, I can leave it alone. Is a vendor doing poorly? Is there risks there? Is there something that's flagged? Maybe I need to be able to dig deeper into that particular vendor in that case. So I think that this particular element is incredibly important to the supplier scorecard, but also just to supplier lifecycle management. The next element is outputs, right? Matching practices, what does the vendor say that they're capable of, right, with the actual output, what they have been able to proven that they are capable of. This is an incredibly interesting dichotomy, but also correlation between these two things. Why? Well, a vendor might say, hey, I have an ISO 9001 certification. I am excellent at quality management. Within the performance monitoring, however, we might start seeing dips, complaints, claims, kind of the differentiation in the parts per million that are accepted into our production line. These are all issues, of course. What does that mean is that I can be able to spot directly there a correlation, a differentiation between what a vendor says to me is maybe good within, for example, their particular world, their business practices versus then, for example, what the actual output and value is that they're delivering to me as an end customer. Incredibly important to be able to see those particular insights side by side to be able to track, is the vendor really living up to what they say that they're able to live up to as well. And I think that it's important to recognize as well here, both with compliance as well as with performance, that it is not a one size fits all. You need agility within whatever capabilities you have in your scorecarding to be able to do things that are unique to your particular business and unique, of course, to your acceptance criteria for what good and bad looks like as well. The last element is, of course, again, that rating methodology. If nothing, what this helps you to be able to do, again, is spot risks and opportunities fast, but it also helps to be able to quantify things in an opportunity to give you a snapshot of value progression over time. Is a vendor, in fact, getting better or getting worse? If we are, of course, managing a vendor, we want them to be able to improve. We want to be able to start seeing trends in the things that we're doing together with our vendors, whether that be on a perspective of performance or risk or compliance or innovation in that case. With that being said, I would love to be able to pause here and allow everybody to be able to answer our last poll that we have. And I'm curious, where exactly are you currently in your journey of building smart supplier scorecards? Are you currently just gaining an understanding of how you could be able to do it? Are you building momentum internally? Maybe you have something, but you're not really working, in a system that's there. Or are you actively looking for SRM systems that are going to be able to be something that is a part of your repertoire in your procurement organization? Take a moment just to be able to answer on screen here. Where are you in your particular journey of smart supplier scorecarding. And I'll go back to the overview as well while everybody fills in this poll of the 8 essential features of smart supplier scorecards before we then get into the demonstration of Kodiak Hub's supplier scorecarding capabilities. Please remember, if you have any questions, do drop them in the chat, and we will make sure to get around to those during today's session. At the end of the session, again, please answer the poll that's on screen now. Are you currently just gaining an understanding? Are you trying to build momentum internally and build a business case for a solution and build some momentum around the need for supplier scorecards? Are you actively looking for SRM systems to build supplier scorecards? Great, thank you all for answering the poll. We'll give just another 10 seconds to be able to do so. Are you gaining an understanding? Are you building momentum internally, or are you actively looking for SRM systems? And then we will transition soon over to the demonstration of the Kodiak platform. Awesome. Thank you all for taking the time to be able to respond on those polls. Very helpful for today's session and interesting to be able to frame the demonstration portion. For the next 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to show off the demonstration of the supplier scorecards that Kodiak Hub has to offer. We'll then pause and we will do a question and answer portion of the session. Please, again, if you have questions, make sure to add them into the chat line now. That is perfectly fine by us, and we will get around to those towards the end of the session as well. So I'm going to share my screen here and make sure that everyone can be able to also see my screen. I'll wait just 1 second for confirmation. Somebody in my team. Dave, do you mind just shooting me a text message if the screen is up and running, or coming on stage and letting me know?
It is there. All good.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Olson. Let's get into things. So welcome into the Kodiak Hub platform. Our solution, like I mentioned, is an end-to-end SRM solution focused on various areas of supplier relationship management, everything from onboarding and registration to due diligence, quality management, ongoing collaboration, performance management, and of course, strategic decision-making. What I'm going to dig into now, of course, is the supplier scorecard. That is our focus for today. Let me maybe give this a zoom so we can be able to see the supplier scorecard even better here. The purpose of today is not to give an end-to-end demonstration, but to give a focused view of what the outcomes can be when you're, of course, utilizing a solution like Kodiak Hub to capture data, information, documentation from various data sources, existing solutions, ERP, suppliers, as well as internal stakeholders to build up these 360-degree and holistic views of a vendor base as well. If you'd like a demo, we'll of course launch a link later that you can be able to request a demo. You can also feel free to do so on our website whenever you would like to, and you'll be able to get in touch with the team that is in the region near you. So this is the supplier scorecard, AKA the control tower. Welcome. This particular interface is where our customers spend a lot of their time as well, and our users utilize this pretty deeply to be able to manage the life cycle of a particular vendor. At a high level, we see, of course, a lot of information here. Not only the data properties that are associated with this vendor, but we see at the very top of the screen already snapshot of the overall capabilities of this vendor based upon their global rating. That global rating, as we see, is a amalgamation or an aggregation of the 3 pillars of health that we see below. Safe source, which is the country risk rating, performance, which is their actual output, and sustainable practices, which is driven by, for example, self-assessments and able to be then taken precedent over by audits that are managed in the platform as well. Again, digging into the actual business practices of this particular vendor, typically utilized for risk management, ESG, as well as then also compliance related items when onboarding vendors or an ongoing self-assessment. We can also see at a very high level, for example, when the vendor's been added, maybe their website that we can jump to, their name, as well as then their approval status and any type of location that they are located within their country to be particular. If we'd like to, from this interface, we can be able to dig deeper. We can always expand and kind of drill down on these different insights. Where I want to be able to start is, for example, surrounding the data properties. Data properties are all of the data that we have on file for this vendor. What does this allow me to do? Well, say that, for example, I'm curious as to who it is that is the quality manager that is responsible. Well, with a click of a few buttons, I can be able to find it. Oh, well, who's the sales contact at this particular vendor? Again, a click of a few buttons, I can be able to find this information. Equally so, I could be able to utilize this to be able to keep different types of business or commercial information on file, categorization, segmentation, you name it. What does this mean is that it allows me, for example, when I'm in a list overview, to be able to create segments of my vendors, to find those vendors accordingly, and to really help that information to drive the insights, the dashboards of my vendor base, so forth and so on. And I'll get back to that later. But again, the star of the show here is going to be the scorecards today, more so than any of the other features of the platform. What do we also have on the right-hand side of the screen here? Well, we have note-taking capabilities. Here, for example, I can be able to leave a note. I can be able to take away a note. I can be able to edit notes if I have the user capabilities to be able to do so. Why is this important is because it gives me the opportunity to be able to set up notifications in the platform and see, for example, when notes have been left for me or by another user. If, for example, this is a vendor that is my purview, I could be able to set up notifications and have those rolling. So anytime notes are left on this vendor scorecard, I am then identified. What does that do as well? It allows internal collaboration in the team, right? We see this all the time that somebody, for example, knows something, but they don't have the means to be able to get in touch. They send an email about it and it gets lost in some large thread or over the weekend, and it's no longer, right? This gives us a systematic and kind of a detailed way to be able to send notes, log notes, whether those are related back to something we want an internal stakeholder to look at or related back to the relationship of the vendor. But this is internal note taking for that exact use case in that case as well, which is, of course, to be able to communicate internally. Now let's shift our eyes to the left-hand side of the screen. The pillars of health, as I mentioned before: country risk, the overall operational risk and their business practices, as well as then the star of the show in the middle, the performance, the actual output driven by performance evaluations. These particular insights are driven then by the activities that are done to be able to impact the relationship. Self-assessments, audits, and performance evaluations. Those particular insights and KPIs that you're capturing via those tasks and impacting the relationship, those are the things that are going to drive the front end here, which is then the actual results. What does that result in? Well, it results in an ability to be able to see where are their risks and where are their opportunities. Again, it also results in the opportunity to be able to see value progression over time. Is a vendor getting better or are they getting worse within various KPI areas that might be important to us, whether that's for, again, within the work of our qualification and approval process, or, for example, in our ongoing performance evaluation of a vendor as well. Prior assessments, audits, and evaluations sit here at any point in time. We want to be able to find a quick audit that's happened. No worries. I have that report right here. I can be able to drill down into that individual audit report as I see fit, understand what the audit summary is, as well as then also be able to see where the vendor has fared within this particular audit. We start seeing here again how the rating methodology shines through. The weightings and ratings are associated back to KPIs, whether those be in assessments, audits, or performance evaluations. And those are the things then that are driving, of course, the front end, the scorecarding, the reporting capabilities that are so visual and allow us to be able to see a snapshot of where is a vendor doing well, where are they potentially doing poorly and need to be able to improve in that case as well. Now, if we shift our vision to the right-hand side of the screen here, I wanted to be able to show off really quickly some of the other aspects, the third-party risk. We had mentioned it before. It's nice to be able to amalgamate not only the view of the vendor based upon their self-assessments or performance evaluations or audits that we're doing, but instead also to be able to bring in market intelligence. Being able to, of course, keep our front doorstep clean, understanding their risk and resilience profile, understanding, of course, if they in fact are a type of vendor that we want to work with. Here, for example, we can have things like their credit score. We can have things, for example, like media insights, giving us a snapshot, for example, of any type of different articles that have been written about the business that we are interested in following up on. and Plexor being a fake business, well, we are then making a search right now for Tesla, for example. This can also, of course, be hooked up to notifications, allowing us to be able to stay on top of things that might be important, whether those be positive or potentially negative impacts to our brand and reputation in that case as well. The last element that sits here is then the trade trust capabilities. Trade trust is then the sanctions, blacklists, and also politically exposed persons focus. This gives us a snapshot of, for example, the results of this particular business. We can be able to see some other information about this business, identifiers, locations, so forth and so on, as well as then also the sources of why this particular business has been able to pop up on their politically exposed persons, their sanction lists, and the like. And if we want to, we can even be able to dive down into those individual special interest persons, persons of interest, and or, for example, politically exposed persons, and understand exactly why they are in fact listed as a reputational risk to our business as well. This gives us a leg up, of course, when we're onboarding new vendors, doing due diligence that's ongoing on vendors, or just trying to stay on top of, for example, the risk exposure in the supply chain. Having this continuously on and allowing it to notify us if there's any changes gives us, of course, the capabilities to be able to stay on top of any type of third-party risks that might be out there within the world as well. Now, let's focus a little bit further up in the scorecard. The other thing that I wanted to be able to show off, of course, is documentation. Just in the same way as we have our supplier data here, well, I mentioned before, we might want to be able to have our supplier documentation here. It's an important element, of course, to the supplier relationship. Why is it so important? Well, because again, contracts expire, ISO certifications expire. It's laborious to be able to reach back out to vendors. All of these capabilities are really reduced by having smart supplier scorecards, but also an SRM or SLM solution to be able to manage the life cycle and the relationship over time. What does this give us the capability to be able to do is capture documentation that is shared with us by the vendor, categorize it, mark it with expiry dates. And of course, those are the things that can be able to save us that monotonous activity of having to follow up with vendors. Why? Is because we can be able to trigger smart actions to those vendors, opening up portals for them to be able to share that information. We can do quick searches for documentation, whether that be actually within the search. We can be able to do different types of searches based upon the categorization of the document, for example. We can also be able to, as you see here, segment things based upon when they were uploaded or when they're due to expire. And we can also be able to always have an audit trail of who it was that has uploaded documents, whether that be the vendor or an internal stakeholder. And we do, in fact, have a direct integration with DocuSign in our scorecarding capabilities as well. This is nice, of course, because when we're signing, we don't need to download the document and then put it back into the scorecard. It's going to all happen via the scorecard, and the final version will then land back in the scorecard as well, making sure, again, that we cut down on like losing NDAs or losing codes of conducts that are signed off on or losing contracts that are signed off on as well, keeping everything all in one place. The other aspect that we see here related back to information, again, vendor information lies within the data properties, but we also have a product and service element of information. Here we can be able to see individual commodities and commodity versions. We can be able to, for example, drill down on those commodities that this vendor is providing us with. We can also see how they roll up, for example, into particular products and services. So let's take a particular example here of a pet bottle. We're able to then dive in here and better understand what is the composition of this bottle. Again, information management goes a layer deep than, for example, the information of a vendor. It goes to the contract and it goes to the product, right? It is not only who you're buying from, but how much does it cost and what the heck is it, right? These are the three elements that we try and always keep in focus for our customers to make sure that, documentation linked back to this product or service is in place. That, of course, if there's a, compliance, some type of a compliance requirement on us being able to report on this product, we have then the capabilities to be able to do so as well. Also, to be able to make sure that we understand the relational data, not only between a single vendor, but our products and commodities and the full vendor base. We might be, utilizing multiple vendors to be able to get a single commodity, or, for example, to be able to get a particular product in place. Well, then we can be able to see how those different vendors are connected back to this product or particular commodity. And again, that relational data gives us the flexibility to jump between the different views and manage these particular items accordingly as well. The last element of the scorecarding, again, is communication and collaboration. The reason why I finished this, utilize this for the end, is because communication and collaboration is something that can either be ongoing, but what we see very often as the use case of our action space, of course, is corrective actions, nonconformities, improvement proposals, things that are focused on improvement and or correction, mainly that during the life cycle of the vendor based upon some of the other insights that are coming in, right? What does this give us the opportunity to do? Well, we can be able to, for example, have all of our existing activities. We can find them based upon type. We can search for them. We can have them based upon status. This allows us not only to have active activities, but also those things that are, for example, currently in an approval chain, or, for example, different types of activities and actions or collaboration tasks that we have ongoing that are, for example, already done and reposited as well. What this opens up is then it opens up a communication and collaboration chain. The scorecard is then the front, kind of window to this collaboration space. And it gives us the opportunity to be able to communicate back and forth, to be able to share documents, request documents, and also to be able to, as you see here, manage different types of sub-processes that maybe are important for us to be able to communicate back and forth on as well. What it also does is it gives us the opportunity to have multi-threaded stakeholder communication and collaboration, something that is so important. I'm pretty sure the statistic is that it's 4 to 9 stakeholders that are typically involved in a supplier approval. So you can imagine being able to set up these approvals in our action space, a classic use case where it then step by step has the approval chain of those individuals and then allows, for example, a final approver to actually approve this particular action that you have in place. And the beautiful thing also from a compliance perspective is that we do have, for example, also the added ability to be able to audit this particular action as well. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, this particular risk came up in your supply chain in Q2 of last year. Did you actually do something about it? Absolutely. I have an audit chain of everything that was done on this particular activity as well. And you can be able to show that directly off to anyone that is coming and knocking on your front door. Again, smart supplier scorecards is about the smart focus, right? And I think that what we're showing here is the abilities to be able to amalgamate into one place and really be able to drive forward the relationship. The last thing that I have to show off is one of the new functions that we have added into the platform, because I know that there is a customer or two within attendance today. The main reason why is because we have just launched our AI assistant related to creating new actions. In this particular example, I'm, for example, creating here a corrective action plan as I would say then, for example, create a 2-step CAP that is focused on getting back the ISO 9001 and 14001 document with sub-actions for both of those document captures. Also input an approval chain with finance as well. What we can be able to do is, in a moment's time, utilize the generation of this particular AI assistant and generate, for example, a cap that then pulls in the different types of actions, as well as then also the sub-actions that we have asked it to be able to do, and be able to be on our way, choosing the suppliers that are in scope for this particular action, requesting the documentation that we need back from them. And what we can also be able to do, of course, is set this up associated with a trigger to open up these action spaces to our vendors to communicate and collaborate. I had to be able to show that feature off. I'm way too excited about it. So apologies if it's going a little bit beyond some of the scorecarding capabilities here as well. Thank you all for those of you that have stayed through the session. What we'll get around to now is the Q&A session. Please make sure to ask any questions that you want to be answered about the capabilities of the platform and the like. What I'm also going to do here is I'm going to, on screen, link to be able to book a time. If you'd like to explore the Kodiak Hub platform with the team, you can either go on our website and you can be able to then simply book a demo there, or you could be able to click on the link here. It'll take you to the booking link on the website as well to be able to do so. So feel free to be able to find some time there with our team, and we will absolutely get around to your requests right away. You will be able to find some time that works for you. So please, again, if you have any questions, make sure to ask those now in the chat. I see that one question has already come in. Please, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to do so. Dave, I see you came on stage. Anything
Yeah,
from your side?
I was gonna say this is a great question from Sarah. I was thinking maybe we can run a poll on this. It'd be great to hear everyone's what everyone's average score is. If I don't know if you agree.
So Sarah's question was that she is already using a balanced scorecard within their org, and we score out of 10. What is the industry average for vendors? Very interesting question, Sarah. We take a broader perspective of the 0 to 100, mainly because it gives more nuance, which I think is good. This is a 10 times of your current mode of operating, right? It would be interesting to be able to better understand, are people utilizing 1 to 10, Likert scales? Are you utilizing a 0 to 100 scale? It's interesting, but I mean, the robustness, of course, of the varied kind of averages of our solution, we try and make sure that we can be able to bucket them. So you can also look at, for example, high risk, early warning, good, or excellent. So it adds a little bit of an extra layer to that kind of more traditional RAG as well. Thank you so much for that question, Sarah. And congrats then also on having a balanced scorecard in place. That's rare, I think, within this constellation, but also in the space. Nara, the question that's come in from Nara here is what area typically leads, the implementation of this system, IT, procurement, and thank you, Nara, for your question. Our solution's a no-code solution. Of course, with integrations into an existing ERP or data lake, that is where the involvement of an IT team would be. But otherwise, we typically drive implementation of the solution together with our customer and onboarding team, as well as then our customer success team. And of course, then the primary users of the platform. So it is typically procurement, as well as then we typically also have supplier quality as stakeholders in our platform, sometimes compliance, risk, and ESG focused stakeholders as well. So thank you for that question. Without further ado, then I think that if there's no more questions, we will issue the handout here. So if anybody wants to be able to download the slides that you saw in today's content, feel free to be able to do so. That is issued there in a PDF format for your download. And I wanted to just thank everybody very much. Thank you, Annika, as well. Santiago has left, but thanks for that kind words. Appreciate that the insights were useful. And we do hope that you're able to take them further to some of your peers. And looking forward to hearing from you potentially soon. Best of luck, everybody, in your journeys of building smart supplier scorecards. We wish you plenty of luck. Thank you.